Welcome to Proof of PR, your passport to the world of public relations for Bitcoin and Web3. I'm your host, Kelly Weaver, CEO of Melrose PR, a leading provider of communications and PR strategy in our unique industry. Get ready for an inside look into the future of finance, technology, and entrepreneurship from those driving innovation in the space. Join us as we learn how they generate headlines, cut through the noise, and grow their brand awareness through media placements, press mentions, and thought leadership. These are the stories behind their success. This is Proof of PR. Hailey Lennon is a top lawyer in the Bitcoin space. She is a partner at Brown Rudnick, a legal analyst for Forbes Crypto, the founder of Crypto Connect, and has an audience of over 90,000 followers on Twitter. Hailey is a prominent thought leader in our industry, appearing frequently on panels at key industry events and in the media on Fox Business, CNBC, and others. Welcome, Hailey.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. That was a nice intro.
You are a friend of mine and really have grown to be an amazing colleague and have built an incredible reputation and really are one of the top lawyers in this space. I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey into becoming one of the top lawyers in the Bitcoin space.
Thank you. I think it's a mixture of just passion for the crypto industry, but also I got exposed to working in the space early on. So I was based in San Diego where I went to law school, and Silvergate Bank was looking to build out their crypto banking practice. And I already had some experience in sort of financial tech and financial regulation, but it was really there. The chief compliance officer reached out and said, a lot of what you're seeing sort of in traditional finance in the legal and compliance world are really the same issues that our clients, the Coinbases and the Geminis of the world are facing. And we need to really understand that and build out a banking, due diligence program to analyze these companies for banking relationships. So I was already interested in Bitcoin because I worked at a company that was it was a wholesale currency exchange. So they physically transported dollars and pesos across the San Diego, Mexico border. And so my light bulb was already kind of going off in terms of this is so much friction and so much physical cash movement. And then I started to learn more about Bitcoin and I was like, this makes a lot more sense to me. So that's how I got into this space. And it was actually at Silvergate that I started following some of the top attorneys at the time in the space, including Marco Santori. I started following him on Twitter and just like learning a lot from those people. And so that's sort of, I know we'll talk about it later, I think, but how I first started a Twitter account and started learning from the experts that had already been in the space, even if they had only been in 6 months longer than me. I just knew that they had already sort of been in the battle trenches. So
what was your sort of aha moment with Bitcoin? Was it because of the inefficiencies that you were seeing there, or?
Yeah, I guess I think in the US, we don't always think about the global financial system or how money moves or how people are able to send money. And so when I saw all this friction just at the San Diego, Mexico border, and then I started to zoom out and think about it in a global perspective, it just seemed very archaic the way we move money around. And I've always been excited about technology in general and the way in which technology can make things easier. If you think about emails or text messages or all these different ways we communicate in real time now, the light bulb moment was sort of, why doesn't money work that same way? Are there 3 to 5 business day delays and ACH and wire fees and these huge fees when you're talking about like cross-border remittance and currency exchange complexities? So yeah, to me that I read the white paper, and admittedly, the first few times it was like kind of over my head, but it still spoke to me, and like reading even the sort of like Reddit pages and places where people in the early days were talking about the Bitcoin white paper, I just started to get really intrigued, and just really immersed myself. I started in 2014, 2015, started going to conferences, and I was really impressed too by the sort of caliber of the companies that were already in the space, because back then and even today, there's this idea that crypto is this wild, wild west, and it's all these crazy startups with a bunch of kids running them. But there are a lot of, even in 2014, 2015, like really impressive companies that were looking for banking relationships. So there was a few light bulbs that went off. It took a while. Also, the person I was dating at the time was huge into it and already buying Bitcoin. So that helped too, because I had someone close to me able to bounce ideas off or kind of talk about this crazy stuff.
Love that. Yeah, it sounds a lot similar to my sort of journey and aha moments, but it took me multiple touch points before I really understood the potential.
I think it's so different from anything I never questioned like why banks or the government controlled money. I never really thought about inflation. It brings up all these other things that you almost learn about Bitcoin, and then you learn about traditional finance even more because of it. And so it is a bunch of light bulbs. But, I found that Twitter, my relationship, my family, like those contacts gave me the ability to like talk about it out loud. And that's really helpful in understanding things you are interested in and things that also you're still confused about, because it's certainly not super straightforward when you first start to learn about it.
My hope for this podcast is to really help our audience understand like how you built this personal brand and how you've used tools like Twitter and your Forbes outlet and, media appearances to really build a brand around yourself, which I've been very impressed by. I'm curious sort of as it relates to Twitter, what role does it play in your professional life and building your brand?
Yeah, it's funny because I think I've always been someone who uses social media to just share sort of my authentic self. And so when I first started using Twitter, I was kind of behind the scenes. I was just reading and retweeting and, posting CoinDesk articles, just trying to learn and share information that I was seeing. But with time, like I think other parts of your personality, at least for me, other parts of my personality came out as well. And I think that's part of it is, at the core, I've used Twitter as a way to make professional contacts in the industry, make friends, and find out about things, learn about things, or even find out about conferences and events to attend. But so figuring out the right balance of keeping the content and the brand professional and in line with what I do every day, which is a partner at a prestigious law firm, but also showing I think of myself as multidimensional. I like humor. I like animals. I like cooking. And so it just sort of, for me, I naturally started sharing parts of myself like that, because I could, but it would be a lot less fun to just post news and legal analysis and keep it at that. There's just a lot more to me. So that was definitely part of it, is I think over time I've just found the right balance, and it's kind of just true to it's what I am like in real life too. That balance between being approachable and my humor and the professional side. But Twitter's this crazy tool and thing that we have, especially in the crypto space. And it's funny because I really only think of Twitter as that, but there's, so many other industries and niche like areas that people are on Twitter for besides crypto. But crypto Twitter is its own like little world. And it's been great. I mean, in some of my roles, like when I was in-house at Coinbase and Bitflyer, I obviously wasn't doing as much sort of I wasn't in any sort of business development role where I was looking for clients or where sort of that brand would be helpful in my explicit role as in-house counsel at Coinbase. But now being at a law firm and a partner at a firm, being able to use all those connections I have and the brand I've created to be in the back of people's mind when they need an attorney to help them has been a really positive thing for me personally. And, I think a lot of the exposure I've been able to get at conferences and on TV is from people knowing about me from Twitter and thinking, oh, she would be good for this panel, or, hey, I'm reaching out from Fox News. Could you come talk about this? I saw you posted about it yesterday, that sort of thing. So it all kind of, rolls into one in a way as you're showing people what your area of expertise is and what you can talk about, then they start to think about you for opportunities like that as well. And it turns into real world, panels and that sort of thing.
You definitely keep it real on Twitter, and you also are very consistent about it. Is that because it's kind of fun and something you really enjoy?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I'm naturally, in some ways I'm a private person. In other ways, I'm kind of an open book, and I like myself, and I like sharing things that I'm experiencing or things that made me like sort of laugh in real life. I like to share those, and it's almost like, just bringing some humor to it. But I think I just like, it is what I'm like in real life. And so it comes out on Twitter. I mean, in some ways I don't want to say censor it, but like limit it. I think there's a limit to where posting whatever is on my mind or posting any picture I take to something with that large of an audience wouldn't be a good idea. I mean, candidly, like sometimes I crop pictures so that it keeps it more professional. There is a balancing act. I'm not exactly the same on Twitter that I would be with like you over a glass of wine, joking, but I'm pretty close. I like to keep it real. And I mean, to answer your question, I do think it's fun and funny. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you post something and people are mean. Like, you get sort of the trolls coming out, or and that sometimes can be the opposite, where like your intention was to bring humor and lightness to something, and all of a sudden it's having some, you're having to experience negative feedback, and that can be hard too.
I think your point about Twitter providing opportunities for you as it relates to media opportunities and, speaking at events and things like that, you're top of mind by, being in people's feed, and you've done an amazing job of that.
Like I said, I think it's also that, mainstream media and even conferences are looking for content or trying to find people who can speak to certain topics. So if you think about there being like, last year there being the Biden executive order on crypto, I think all like sort of mainstream media was thinking who has a sort of a legal or regulatory background in crypto that could come on and speak about this huge thing that, the White House has put out. And so from the content that I create on Twitter, just on a day-to-day basis, I think I was top of mind for, platforms like Fox. And it's exciting to be able to be invited to go speak about those things. So it has been a great opportunity. I think the positives are definitely outweigh any sort of, trolls or anything like that I experience.
Has that been the biggest challenge, is, just the sleuth of internet negativity that is sort of inevitable when you position yourself publicly?
I mean, I don't really let it get to me too much. I use the mute button a lot. I have certain words muted, and sometimes like threads I'll just mute. So I don't let it get to me too much, but in a way I think that there's a lot of heaviness in the world in general right now. And so I like to bring sort of objective analysis to things and humor to things. And so, yeah, when you start to see, just angry comments all over Twitter, it just makes it less fun for me personally. But no, I think you know part of I think the challenge of creating a brand and Twitter is making sure that you're coming off the way you intend to, right? Because people can misunderstand humor, or they can misunderstand your, like, if I make a joke, do people all of a sudden think, how is she a partner? Like, underestimate my ability to or how I've accomplished so much professionally. So that it's this sort of balancing act of, I just like to be my genuine self, and I think that most people are able to think of me as this extremely well educated, informed expert, but also with a sense of humor. But some people like to put you in boxes.
How have you amassed this audience? I mean, you have over 90,000 followers on Twitter. How has that come to be?
I think in the early days, people were really hungry for information. And sometimes in this industry, because it's new, there's a lot of people that are not objective, right? They're promoting a certain token or project, or they're, there's obviously even like imposters and scammers on Twitter. So I think, for one, I think I've been able to be thought of as sort of a trusted resource. I am careful about stories I share. I'm careful about how I articulate the news. I probably could have 500,000 followers if I posted things that were a little bit more edgy or a little bit more sort of biased or argumentative. But it's important to me, because I'm an attorney, that I share things in a way that's objective and credible. But that's the balancing act, right? I also give my opinions plenty, but I keep the facts straightforward. And so I think in the early days, people were looking for that. Every opportunity it's funny, because opportunities I get from Twitter then feed into me also getting a larger following. So the first opportunity that came to me, in part because of people I knew in the industry for a long time, but also because of Twitter, was writing for Forbes, and being able to write articles and be the author of those articles, and have Forbes then share those articles, I think sends traffic back to you. The same way as getting the opportunities to speak on TV or conferences and being tagged by, those Twitter handles sends traffic back. So it's sort of been a just organic growth. And for me, I try really hard actually not to even, the reason I'm on Twitter is not because I'm watching the number of followers tick up. If I was on Twitter for just followers and I wasn't an attorney, I could probably say things that, people are kind of drawn to controversy, right? I could say more controversial things and maybe get a wave of followers. But for me, it's been more like staying to my authentic self about what I'm on Twitter to talk about, and also sharing some hobbies here and there, like cooking. So yeah, the Twitter followers sort of, I would say, grew really organically through the years. And it's also made it so that the people who follow me and engage with me are there for similar reasons usually. And so it's still an opportunity for me to learn things or ask things or take polls, even, to try to continue learning more information.
I love that the Forbes opportunity sprouted from Twitter. I didn't know that. That's amazing.
I should. It also. So one of the editors used to work at Kraken when I worked at Coinbase, and this is actually a pretty interesting story. When I worked at Coinbase, Kraken rolled out a new user interface for their platform, and I tweeted something really positive about it, even though Kraken was a competitor of Coinbase. this is my personal Twitter account. And like we've talked about keeping it real, I saw the user interface and I thought, wow, that looks really good. And I tweeted about it. And I think, I've heard since that people at Kraken noticed that and said, that's really cool of her that she would like compliment a competitor. And one of the editors at Forbes now used to work at Kraken. So, it came from a combination of Twitter and the friendships and contacts I had in the industry. And I don't want to undersell. It also came from the fact that I've been a lawyer in crypto since 2014, and I can write about it as good or better than anybody. And so, there's that as well. But yeah, I mean, Twitter it's an interesting place, right? I mean, that is to me, it was an interesting story because again, I wasn't really thinking about it as I'm at Coinbase. This is Kraken. They're a competitor. I was just like, I get excited when the industry's doing cool things. And my post certainly wasn't being critical of Coinbase I worked at Coinbase because I liked their product a lot and I liked what they were doing in the industry. But I think that sometimes goes noticed too of how competitors treat one another on social media. Some people like when two CEOs are going at it, and others might think, "Oh, we're all in the same industry. We're all working towards the same thing." So the interpersonal things on Twitter have been interesting as well.
Your posts for Forbes are incredibly well researched and cited and all of that. What is your process for, coming up with topics, writing those articles, finding sources, all of that?
Yeah. So again, Twitter has been helpful in the early days. I started at Forbes, and I was just a contributor, which meant I had a lot of flexibility in the format of my articles and a lot of room for quotes. And so when I first started, I would think of a topic and research it, read all the articles or SEC enforcement announcements and things like that, and kind of compile my thoughts on it. But then I would oftentimes use Twitter to reach out to Hester Peirce of the SEC or Brian Brooks at the OCC, sometimes DMing them and asking for their email or their assistant's email, and having, conversations with people that were in those organizations and part of some of the news that was being discussed, especially in terms of SEC enforcement. And when the OCC had all this crypto, announcements and guidance coming out, just to be able to get a few quotes to really hear what messaging they were trying to put out, helped me develop my sort of opinion or stance. And it wasn't always like the quotes they gave me were the direction I took the article. Sometimes I would, hear the messaging that a regulator was trying to put out and see how the reality as an attorney in the space felt different. But that was one way. And, having some of those conversations early on was really amazing to get access to having a quick phone call. The other thing I'll say is because I'm not my full-time job is not a journalist, I function in a way that I'm not like trying to get someone to say something or like sneaky journalism. I, oftentimes talk to people for an hour off the record, and then pull a few quotes and kind of discuss and say, is this what you were trying to articulate? And that's helped me in my role. Obviously, a part-time writer for Forbes is different than someone who is doing sort of investigative journalism, but that's been helpful to me in getting a good rapport with someone so that I can go talk directly to the source and hear a bit more about what's going on the inside.
Where do you get your news in our industry? Like, how do you stay up to date with all the latest developments?
Twitter. I have, so what I've done is on Twitter, I've turned on notifications for most of the major CEOs in the industry, most of the CoinDesk, Forbes Crypto, Bloomberg Crypto, and then even regulators. So like I have the SEC on a I get pinged if they tweet something, even if it's not about crypto. So that's one way I've sort of filtered information on Twitter. Obviously, I'm on there organically, often just scrolling through and reading what everyone has to say. But turning on Twitter notifications has been helpful for me. I think that the publications like Forbes and Coinbase that dedicate content to the industry put out good sort of like breaking news. And then the Twitter conversations that oftentimes happen even in the comments section are helpful to see, anything that has been missed or anything that's been developing since the story. Twitter it's just crazy to me how it sort of breaks the news in real time. Sometimes articles are even written about tweets, right? Like, so sometimes I'll see a tweet from a CEO of an exchange or something, and then 3 hours later there'll be some like breaking, so and so said this, but I kind of saw it in real time and was like, oh, I'm like processing it. So that's why, crypto Twitter, I think, is what it is that the space moves so fast. I have family members that will like send me pictures of a Wall Street Journal article. And I'll be like, yeah, I read about that 24 hours ago on Twitter. The news just moves so fast in crypto.
It definitely does. And it's interesting. You mentioned the comment section. How often are you reading the comments? Like, I feel like that is a rabbit hole that could suck you in.
I will say I skim or speed read. I also look for people that I know in the industry to see if they're sort of engaging or what they're saying. I don't go too far down the rabbit hole. But, even for me, though, I would say one way that I just sort of unintentionally got engagement and more followers is that I think I'm kind of unique in that oftentimes I do reply to the comments on my posts. And I don't do that. I, didn't do that thinking about the engagement or getting followers. That's part of like the funny banter that I like to have on there. So, when I tweet something, I often do kind of scroll through what people are saying and then respond back with funny things or sassy comments back if they're saying something rude. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword. You can't spend too much time in the comments or worrying about them, because there's always going to be someone saying something that's either not true or just angry and not constructive. And so, yeah, just finding that right balance of the time to recognize how people are responding to things. It's interesting.
How has Twitter changed over the years? And do you have any predictions for the future of it?
It's a good question. Sometimes I get almost nostalgic for the early days of crypto and crypto Twitter because it just felt less tribal, like less Bitcoin maximalists and the XRP army and all these different, I'm someone who I don't love conflict, which is kind of funny as an attorney. I can certainly, throw it back if someone throws it at me. But that's not my nature. And so, I feel like in the early days, there was still, a lot of disagreements and conversations, but they felt more like conversations and like constructive dialogue trying to discuss topics. Whereas now it sometimes feels a little bit more like not constructive, just disagreements or like people saying, I'm right, you're wrong.
What inspired you to create Crypto Connect, and what are your plans for this year with that?
Yeah, so the idea behind Crypto Connect came to me when I was doing a lot of traveling last year. So last year I was post-COVID or, towards the end of COVID, I was trying to figure out where I wanted to live. I had been based in San Francisco for 4 years right before COVID when I worked at Coinbase. I had moved back to Santa Barbara, I have like childhood friends here and family. And I was trying to figure out where next. I knew I didn't want to move back to San Francisco. And so I took this road trip from California to Austin. It was kind of the end of the trip was staying for a month in an Airbnb in Austin and exploring the crypto scene there and connecting with some friends there and seeing if I'd want to live there. And so along the way, I was tweeting about places I was going to next. Like I'll be in Vegas on Thursday. Does anyone want to meet up for a Bitcoin or crypto happy hour? I'll be in Scottsdale, Arizona on this day. Does anyone want to meet up for a happy hour? And when I would do that, I would get pinged into meetups that already existed that might have been happening, around the time I was going to be there, or just people would start tagging people. Oh, so-and-so lives there. You all should connect. And so at every stop along this, my drive, I ended up sort of helping to organize or joining happy hours along the route and meeting all these amazing people. And it made me realize that the crypto space doesn't really have an organization with like chapters where you could be a member of a chapter of whatever city you're in. But if you were traveling or when you moved from San Francisco to Nashville, you could kind of organically meet a community there. And I started having conversations with you and other people, other women in the space especially, who were just really excited about this idea of how do we, keep building in a community and bringing more people into the fold, and, having conversations about there's so many amazing women in this space. And if it was just from all these conversations I was having, I was realizing, wow, I can put together a really amazing board that is also female led, that just helps other women who might be interested in this space see that there's women in the space who are welcoming and want to network with them and mentor them and talk with them. But it was also important that the organization is not just women only. All the events we've hosted so far, open to everybody. And I think organically our events tend to have more women in attendance, which is a great thing for the industry, but that's not the focus. The focus at the end of the day is still just like building a sense of community and opportunities for networking.
Yeah, it's been really fun to be a part of that effort and kind of see it come to life. And also just the connections within the group have been phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, I have calls with the different members often. I speak with you. I spoke to Michelle from TaxBit last week. It's a really great way. I mean, I hope that all of the board members use it similarly to rely on each other for if you're looking for references or wanting to like co-host an event at a conference or things like that. But, it's been hard too, because people in the crypto space are so busy. And obviously our board is women who have one or two or three other jobs and maybe have a family. And so, I think as an organization, we're still sort of figuring out our identity and how we can efficiently be helpful in bolstering the community and the meetups that already exist. So my hope is for this year for us to sort of refocus and get to know the meetups that already exist in our chapter cities and just kind of join forces with organizations or meetups like that already exist. Because when we launched Crypto Connect, within the first week, we had about 6,000 signups. And I remember just being so blown away because the signups say the person's name, the company they work for, their role, and where they're located. And most were, in the different chapter cities we launched in. Some people were from all over the world who had just heard the announcement on Twitter and said, when is there going to be a Crypto Connect Australia and all this stuff? So it has so much potential, but it's none of our first jobs. It's, second, third, fourth job we have. And so, yeah, I think it'll be exciting to see where it can go this year. I feel like we mobilized really quickly, and now it's just about figuring out how all those members can benefit from being part of the organization and how we can also offer standing meetups or conferences access to our member base, and in part that helps with the diversity of the crowds at these events.
Well, this has been such an amazing conversation. I really, really appreciate you taking the time. I suppose in closing thoughts, do you have any ideas as to, where the industry is going to take us this year, or, hopes or perhaps tips for those that are looking to build their own presence and thought leadership?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. I mean, I remain very hopeful and excited about the industry. I've always been pretty outspoken that I personally am the most excited about Bitcoin. And this year so far has been really hard. There's been a lot of bankruptcies. There's individuals who's, have lost access to their funds. And so my hope is that the industry keeps working almost internally on like self-policing and making sure that the companies that individuals trust are doing things right by their customers. I think we will continue to see a lot of enforcement activity from the SEC. I think we're going to continue to see ways in which regulators are really trying to encapsulate everything about crypto and DeFi into their regulations. So my job is definitely not getting any easier, but I think, I think the industry will just keep building. I think for the personal brand part, I would just say that, everyone has their own unique perspective or things to offer. And that to me is sort of the starting point of what a personal brand is, what it is you focus on, what is your area of expertise, what are you excited about, what gets you up in the morning, what are your hobbies, and what parts of that you want to share with the world, like what would help benefit and be interesting to share. We didn't even touch on this, but and you and I should talk about it, because Brown Rudnick has a brand and reputation management practice group. And so even just at Brown Rudnick, I've been trying to sort of learn more about that area of practice, and understand more about sort of brand development and brand management, because I think it's something that came second nature to me, but it's this whole area that I'm trying to learn even more about, not necessarily for myself, but even just the companies we represent.
Well, what I've heard throughout this conversation is authenticity. Like, you've been authentic to yourself, to your followers, to, staying true to what is important to you. And that's really, that's how you've been able to harness this power.
Yeah, I think there's something really great about authenticity, because it's sort of that, there's that motto that, if you lie, you have to remember your lies and cover your tracks. I mean, if you're your authentic self, it's much less work to just put yourself out there in a way that is true to yourself, and it allows you to just channel your areas of passion and expertise and share that. I think that if people think of a personal brand as who they naturally are, that is usually a better starting point than trying to invent the brand. But that's just my opinion.
Well, thank you so much, Hailey. Everyone go follow Hailey on Twitter at Hailey Lennon BTC. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me. This is great. I'm excited to hear future episodes.
Thanks for tuning in to Proof of PR. This episode was brought to you by Melrose PR, a leading provider of communications and PR strategy for Bitcoin and Web3 innovators. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen today. To stay up to date on upcoming guests and news, visit proofofpr.com or follow us on Twitter at proofofpr. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and hodling.